So here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We're going to look at the key steps in choosing a new career. We've actually developed here at FlexJobs our own four-step system for career changers, a link to which is included in the resources tab of Big Marker. So if you're interested, please feel free to check that out in more detail after the webinar today. We'll also discuss some tips for finding remote job postings and look at some common remote career fields and industries. And then we'll finish up today with our audience Q&A. All right, so we'll dive right in. So whether you have already chosen a new career path or are maybe just thinking about making a career change, these are some of the key things that you will want to consider. As I'm sure many of you are already aware, when you're first deciding to change careers and attempting to develop a transition plan, it can really feel overwhelming because you might not know where to begin. We want to know what's next, but that information isn't necessarily readily available to us right away. So we're kind of forced to deal with a degree of uncertainty, and dealing with that uncertainty can be really challenging. Sometimes it causes, some fear, some anxiety, maybe even some self-doubt. But, making a meaningful and successful career change, while it does take hard work, if you're willing to put in that time and effort, you certainly can find success. But the biggest thing to really understand is, you want to take things one step at a time. That's why we developed this four-step system. You don't want to try to do everything all at once, because if you do, that uncertainty and self-doubt can start to creep up. To give a quick example, I actually started my career as a middle school social studies teacher before deciding to make a change. And when I first made that decision, I was dealing with some of that fear and anxiety. I wasn't really sure what options were available for me outside of education, and I didn't really know if employers would find value in the skills that I possess. So it created some of that fear and anxiety. But I was able to kind of take a step back, sort of refocus and think through things logically and take things one step at a time. And, doing that can really help your brain from snowballing and letting those negative thoughts kind of race out of control. Because if those negative thoughts start racing out of control, it might make you want to revert back to, what feels comfortable or safe. And then you're kind of just stuck back where you started. So, you want to focus on the immediate step or two in front of you. Try to avoid diving in headfirst and just applying to, any and all jobs right away before you have that clear plan. Taking the time to develop that clear plan allows you to, be intentional with your time, give yourself a chance to gather information, prepare your strategies, and, make informed decisions. It's also important to note, you want to remember to have some compassion for yourself. Give yourself some grace. It very well might be a challenging journey for you, but again, that doesn't mean you can't be successful in the long run. So we developed this four-step system for choosing a new career because, we often heard people asking, I've done X my whole career, what should I do now? And that's really not an easy question to answer because only you can really determine the right choice for you. So just to give you a real quick overview of the four-step system, it was designed to, help you self-reflect with some questions to consider to understand your motivations, to better determine what you like, what you don't like, maybe what you're trying to avoid, what you want to work towards. It also provides you with some assessments and resources that will help you begin to develop a list of viable career options that could be a good fit for you. It also explains some research methods that you can employ to help you uncover more about the options you've developed and, narrow down that list of possibilities. And then it walks you through how to evaluate that full list of possibilities so you can determine, what type of career or careers you want to target and help you develop a plan to pursue them. I'll talk about this a little bit further, but, the whole point of this is try to reframe your search from, okay, I'm trying to get away from this, and instead let's focus on what you want to move towards. So trying to change the mindset from running away to running towards instead. And we'll look at each of these steps a bit more deeply as we go along. And I do definitely recommend, checking out the 4-step system in the resources section if you're interested. But if so, just make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to work through the system. It can take about 2 hours or so, maybe a little bit more. There's quite a lot of work involved in it, but these are the types of decisions that shouldn't be made lightly. Okay, so step one is getting to know your motivations, which is a really important step in changing your career. Essentially, you want to get to know your why. It can be, kind of overwhelming to just ask yourself, why do I want to change careers? Because, there could be a lot of different answers there, or, maybe your answer is, I feel really burned out in my current career, and that doesn't tell us a whole lot. So you want to break things down into smaller, more manageable, kind of introspective questions that can help you develop your why more easily. You know that you want a change, but what factors are influencing this decision? Conducting some of this self-reflection can be important before moving forward. Do you want a new career or maybe just a new job? You might actually really like what you're already doing, but your current company isn't a good fit for you. You also want to consider, what do you want work to feel like, and how is your current career failing to make you feel that way? And try to examine, would a new career bring that to you? And be keeping that question in mind as you're examining possible career options. And then also, are you trying to get away from something specific? What is it you're hoping to avoid going forward? While we do want to reframe our search to focus on what we're running towards, like I mentioned earlier, it is still important to know what you want to avoid. And, these types of questions allow you to self-reflect, get a better understanding of the reasons behind your desire to change careers, as well as help you begin to form a direction for your career change. So the questions on the previous slide do help you better understand sort of the negatives, the things you want to move away from. And then once you do know what you're trying to avoid, you want to make sure that you also have a clear understanding of what you do want. So, you want to kind of flip the script a little bit here. It allows you to make it more of a positive action, reframe, what you're moving away from to what you're moving towards, like I mentioned. So, you might think my job is boring and uninteresting. So you'd flip that around to, I want a job that is interesting and exciting. Now you'll have to define what that might mean for you, but it allows you to flip it around into a positive. Your career field might feel highly inflexible, so you know that you want flexibility to be able to set your own schedule, set your own hours. This flipping the script in this way can help you think about the types of roles that will be interesting and fulfilling for you professionally, and better understand, your specific needs, so you can target career options that will meet those needs. So step 2 is all about making a comprehensive list of possibilities, or to use a metaphor, it's sort of the throwing the spaghetti on the wall step. The goal here is just to, really build the list at this stage. Don't worry yet about, bad ideas. Just think of everything that could be interesting to you or might be a good fit, so that you're able to start building this list. The good ideas will stick to the wall and you can explore them more closely going forward. The bad ideas will start to fall off the wall and you can forget about them. For now, just throw whatever comes to you on the wall at this stage, and then you can investigate them and whittle down the list as you go along. There are definitely a lot of strategies to help you kind of develop this list of possibilities. You can use some resources that present you with different career options. Just for an example, we have our 20 most popular work from home job titles. It can be helpful to look at common job titles because maybe some will, stand out to you as potentially being a good fit or spark ideas for other options. We have a 7 growing career fields resource out there. Career One Stop also lists some fast growing careers, and it never hurts to look at fields that have a bright hiring outlook, especially if job security is a potential concern for you. It can also be a really good idea to take different assessments, which I mentioned, many of them are included in our 4-step system in the resources tab. Assessments can help you better hone in on your specific skills, interests, work values, things like that, and present you with some career options that might align well with your results from those assessments. And when you're looking at these options that you're presented with after these assessments, do think back to that first step, your motivations and your preferences that we discussed, and ask yourself, which career options can check off most, if not all, of those boxes, so to speak. This will help you start to narrow down your list, and we'll talk about how to narrow it further here in a little bit. Another option is you could ask ChatGPT. If you're unfamiliar, ChatGPT is an AI language model that responds to questions or prompts that you give it with helpful information. So, you could ask something like, I'm a teacher, but I want to leave traditional education and find a remote job. What are some potential options for me? And you'll be presented with a list of things that you could potentially add, some spaghetti that you could add to that wall that you could maybe investigate a bit further. And after looking at different lists and taking different assessments, things like that, you might start to have some solid options in mind. But a few other things that you could consider or ask yourself are, what transferable skills do you possess, and what jobs could they maybe translate to? Transferable skills, if you're unfamiliar, those are often called, your soft skills, and they're the types of skills that are valuable in really any career field. So your ability to communicate effectively and work with a team, solve problems, think critically, things like that. For myself, my transferable skills that I really sort of honed in on when making that transition from being a teacher, I thought about how I'm good at training and instructing. I can explain complex things in a way that's easy to understand. I communicate really well. So focusing on those transferable skills can give you, some ideas of, what other jobs might sort of align with those skills and abilities. You would also want to ask or consider, what types of jobs you just think might be interesting that maybe you've heard about throughout your career, and, think about if those could potentially, check off those boxes in regards to your motivations and preferences. It can also be helpful to ask others what they think you are good at. Your friends, your family, current or former coworkers, or maybe your past managers, things like that. We don't always realize the value behind the things that we're really good at because we're so used to using those skills, or maybe they come so easily to us. We don't, necessarily realize that others don't possess those skills. So it can be helpful to just kind of tap into other resources, continue to use some of these introspective questions to determine some of those potential options. And once you have, your full list, or, your wall covered in spaghetti, the questions on this slide can really help you start to narrow down that list a little bit and begin examining, which of these options might be genuinely viable for you. It's helpful to, remove options that obviously aren't a good fit in this sort of step and the next step as well, because it makes things kind of easier as you go along. So kind of look at maybe the commonalities between the jobs on the list that you've developed. Hopefully they reflect what you do want in a job while also helping you avoid what they don't want. And, if you find that that's not true with some of the jobs on your list, you might need to start removing them now before even moving forward. It can also be really helpful if you find that your list is really large to start to try to rank the options on the list to further narrow things down. You might still have a lot of options at this point, but if you can get your list down to maybe a top 10 or a top 5, things will start to get much easier for you. And, I will add, it's not a bad thing to have an expansive job search. There might be a handful of careers that you are considering actually applying for, but you do eventually want to focus your efforts a bit more narrowly to make it a bit more manageable for you. So something else to ask yourself is why you like each of these jobs that still remain on your list, or maybe that you've ranked highly. It's sort of like revisiting the first question on this slide. Do they meet all of your needs and interests? So as you continue going along throughout these other steps, just keep asking yourself those questions. Does this really seem interesting to me? Will it meet my needs? That way, you can make sure you end up in a place that's going to be fulfilling for you. So step 3 is what I would probably argue is the most important step, because now you'll be able to really take a deep dive into the different roles you've identified and start to prioritize and find out more about each role. So before you commit to a specific change, like I mentioned earlier, you want to be fully informed. You want to know what you're getting yourself into. You don't want any, unhappy surprises here. So research can really help you determine qualifications that you might be lacking for these fields. Maybe there are some skills or technologies, or maybe even certifications that are highly sought after in these fields. So you know what you might need to build or expand upon. And that's not to say you should necessarily dive into taking classes or self-study quite yet, or take great lengths to learn all these things, but it can be helpful so that you are prepared for what might come next. So this slide and the next have some solid research methods that you can consider. You could, check out YouTube, maybe just search for day in the life of an accountant, or what is it like to be a project manager? And you'll get some solid videos that will provide you some greater insights. I mentioned ChatGPT earlier. You could ask things like, what are the top skills needed to be a software developer? Or what qualifications do you need to be a customer success manager? And you'll find some helpful information there. Again, be able to determine like, okay, do these look like qualifications I already have a majority of? Or, are there definitely things that I'm missing? Again, just so you can determine what you might need to build upon. Career One Stop and Own It. I mentioned Career One Stop earlier. Both of these websites are based on Bureau of Labor statistics, and they contain a lot of good information about, most jobs that you can think of. And they can both help you really understand sort of the intricacies of different roles. And one thing that's also really helpful about both of these resources is they will include lists of common education levels for people in these types of roles, or maybe degree or certification requirements, so that you're, again, fully informed there. It's also really helpful to look at active job listings so that you know what the expectations are for different jobs and what employers are specifically looking for. Now, I do want to mention, when you're looking at job postings for some of your career options, you don't need to match 100% of the things that are listed in those postings. Just think of it as kind of the employer's ideal wish list. But a good baseline to use is you want to aim for things where you have about 60 to 70% of the qualifications. But do also keep in mind, typically they will list preferred qualifications versus required qualifications. If you're missing just maybe one or so of the required qualifications, you can still be a good fit. But if you're missing a lot of those required qualifications, you might want to look at how you could potentially gain those qualifications, or you might end up ruling it out because maybe there's too many things that you're missing and you don't have the time, money, and energy to invest in getting those qualifications. So LinkedIn can also be a really good tool to conduct research. As you are probably aware, job descriptions don't necessarily paint a perfectly clear picture of what, exactly you might be doing in this job. So you could look at profiles of employees who do this type of work to see how they describe their roles. It can give you some greater insight into sort of the day-to-day aspects of different types of careers. You could also conduct informational interviews, which are another great way to gather information sort of directly from the source. An informational interview that can be conducted with someone you maybe already know who's doing that type of role, or someone who is a connection of someone you already know, or maybe someone you found on LinkedIn, or you could even check out your alma mater's page on LinkedIn to see if there are any people in your alumni group who are in that type of role that you could potentially interview. And informational interviews can be conducted in person, over the phone, through video chat, or even by email or LinkedIn messaging. I always recommend, making sure to respect the other person's time and communication preferences. Maybe if they're really busy, it might be easier for them if you just send them a list of, a couple questions via email so that they can answer them for you when they have the time. Typically, with an informational interview, you want to ask about 3 to 5 questions about what the role is like, maybe what they enjoy or don't enjoy about that career, what surprised them about that career when they were new to it, or maybe how they launched their career. Because, you're trying to launch your career in this field now, so you could get some good information from them about how they got started. And there is a nice guide included in the resources tab on conducting informational interviews effectively. So if that's one of the research strategies that you want to add to your tool belt, make sure to check out that guide. Okay, so hopefully the steps up to this point will help you, generate your list of ideas, start narrowing things down. And so now you want to finish narrowing down that list into just a few options so you can really kind of target your search. So these questions here, focus on your qualifications and fit for certain careers, as well as whether or not they meet your needs. So you want to ask yourself, does this career move away from the things about work that I dislike or no longer want to do? Does it move me towards what I do want? Do you have the education or background needed for this career? If not, are you willing and able to invest the time, money, energy to obtain it? Does this career offer the flexible arrangements that you want or need? What about the salary prospects? Is it going to be suitable for you? Also ask, what does your gut say about this career? Our immediate intuition tends to be a pretty valuable resource. So listen to your gut. Does it feel like it could be something that's a good fit for you? Or do you have some reservations? If you have a lot of reservations, maybe that's not a good option. And then after going through all these questions, which jobs or careers still remain on your list? When you look at the ones that still remain on your list and that hopefully, make the most sense for you to pursue, you then want to really, look at the qualifications again. If you already have that 60 to 70% or more of the key qualifications, it might be time to start searching and applying for jobs. Do keep in mind again that, employers don't expect you to have 100% of the main qualifications. They want, at least that 60 to 70%, but then also you want to, demonstrate your capability and eagerness to learn, whether through your cover letter or talking about that in your interview, or maybe even on your resume, you're mentioning certain areas where you had to master, a new system or maybe even a new technology quickly, just to show that you're someone who's capable and eager to learn new things. If you don't have that 60 to 70% of the key qualifications yet, you want to evaluate which ones you're missing and determine a plan for how you might obtain them. And that can take a lot of different shapes. It might include finding some short-term experiences, like maybe volunteering or trying to find an internship or even a returnship. If you're not familiar, a returnship is very similar to an internship. Some companies have returnships, usually for people who have been out of the workforce for a while, but very similar in nature to returnships. You can also look to see if there are any options for temporary, freelance, or contract roles in this field, so you can kind of dip your toes in the water there a little bit. You could look into maybe taking classes or online courses to maybe build up some skills or possibly obtain a certification. You don't necessarily need a certification, but again, you want to pay attention to what you're seeing in active job postings to help determine, whether that is something that you're seeing time and time again as a required or a heavily preferred qualification, because it might be worth pursuing that. Same kind of thing with looking at degrees. Do you need to go back to school to enter this new career field? A lot of people are scared to change careers because they think it'll automatically require that they need a new degree, but that's usually not the case, especially if you already have, a bachelor's degree. But you do want to look at, again, those required qualifications. But typically, you can emphasize those transferable skills that we talked about earlier to show that, you could be a good fit for that role. And then you also might want to invest some time in learning some new technology or software programs. Usually that's where most people are lacking, especially when looking for remote jobs. You might have some of the basics already, like maybe Microsoft Office or like Google Workspace, but maybe you need some remote collaboration tools like Zoom or Slack or Microsoft Teams or Dropbox. You might also find some more specific ones like maybe Microsoft Excel if you're trying to get into an analytical field, or coding or programming languages, things like that. So it can be really helpful to invest some time and energy to build up, some of those technology skills. But regardless of whether or not you have that 60 to 70% of qualifications already, changing career fields can often take longer than just staying in that same type of role that you previously held, but searching for a different company. And because of this, it can be helpful to continue building and developing new skills and qualifications as you are searching and applying for jobs. So kind of take that twofold approach, work on searching and applying for jobs while you are also trying to build up skills and experience. And then make sure that you're updating your resume as you go along. Every new thing that you add to, your list of qualifications, make sure you're updating your resume as well, so you're presenting yourself as, a solid candidate for those roles. So after going through that 4-step system and really determining what careers you want to potentially pursue, now the big question is whether or not that career path can be done remotely. And when you're looking at remote jobs or trying to find remote jobs, I always recommend using the advanced search option on FlexJobs if you haven't already, because it allows you to kind of filter more specifically to make sure that the options you're being presented with will meet your preferences. So you can, when you're searching for remote jobs or any job really, you certainly can start by, trying to search by a specific job title to see if there are remote listings already advertised. But one thing to be aware of is that companies are often trying to get sort of creative, I'll say, with their job titles. For example, if you're looking for something in human resources or something like that, you might, maybe customer service, you might find job titles listed as like happiness expert. Or if you're looking for like IT related jobs, you might see it listed as like technical guru. So sometimes when you're searching by job title, appropriate advertisements or postings won't necessarily pop up. So that means you want to get creative in your search as well and try to search by, skill or functional area, as well as job titles. So just to give you some quick examples of how you could search by skill or function, if you're searching by soft or transferable skills, you could search for things like training or maybe calendar management or project management or problem solving. Those could yield some potential options for you. In terms of personal attributes, maybe team management or leadership, those are some good examples of personal attributes that you could search. And then hard skills, that means sort of technical skills like maybe Microsoft Excel or QuickBooks, or maybe something very industry specific that you could search by. Again, just to make sure that you're trying to uncover roles that you might have potentially missed otherwise. So searching by job title and then also skill and function can help you kind of broaden your search there a little bit better. Okay, so here are some top fields for, remote and flexible options, as well as, some fast growing career fields as well that are offering, remote and hybrid options. These are based on current FlexJobs posting data. So don't get worried, if you don't see fields that you're interested in listed here. These are really just sort of the, some of the top options out there. Out of dozens of industries, hundreds of job titles. So just because you don't necessarily see it listed here doesn't mean that there aren't remote opportunities out there in your areas of interest. Just wanted to present some potential options here. Okay, so let's go ahead and recap here a little bit and talk about some action steps to help you with your career change before we move on to our Q&A portion. So just as a reminder, first you want to get to know your motivations. What is it you're looking for? What are you trying to avoid? You want to go ahead and make that list of possibilities. Remember, that can be a large list at first before you start to narrow them down. Then you'll conduct some of your research that allows you to narrow down that list to, just your top most viable options. And you want to use a multitude of research methods. We mentioned a whole bunch of them earlier. And then you're going to start finalizing your list after starting to narrow down to your top options. Then you want to start searching and applying for jobs and or develop a plan to increase your skills in that field if you aren't quite yet meeting that 60 to 70% of qualifications. And then, of course, really start actively applying as you're building up more of that experience and qualifications. So that concludes the recorded webinar portion of today. We'll go ahead and move into our Q&A. As a reminder, a copy of the recording, as well as the resources we discussed throughout the webinar, will be emailed to you within the next week or so. Do be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered there. For even more tips and resources, I do definitely recommend going to the flexjobs.com/blog, which includes a vast amount of free articles, guides, webinars, and videos for members and non-members alike. So we will go ahead and move into our Q&A portion of the webinar. Just as a friendly reminder, make sure to put your questions in the Q&A tab, not the chat section, and click a thumbs up if someone else has asked a question that you want to hear the answer to. All right, let's go ahead now and open it up to questions.
Hey everybody, it's Tony here, your career expert who is ready to answer questions. So feel free to get those questions in the Q&A. I see one here. What is the best way in a cover letter to explain you are trying to convert to a new field? All right, so a couple things that you want to do here is look for your transferable skills. Also, before I continue to answer this question, if you go into the resources section, the first resource says samples, templates, and scripts for resumes, and it goes on to say cover letters and things like that. If you open that, there are some sample Q&A or cover letters there. So one of the things that you want to do is obviously when you're trying to go into a new career field, you're connecting your transferable skills. There's something that's pulling you in that direction. And so that's the piece that you want to illustrate in a cover letter, but you also need to really lean into the skills that you already have that would be a good fit or complementary to the role. Just like Keith said in the presentation, he used to be a teacher. I was not a career expert or even a career coach is the position I got hired to at FlexJobs. When I was first hired, I had never held those positions before. But it really was my cover letter that described that the jobs that I was doing previously, which were in business coaching and franchise business consulting, were very transferable to the career coaching role because I was working with people trying to help them achieve a goal. And that's really what I illustrated in my cover letter. So you're trying to find that common theme that you can thread or weave through your cover letter. Please expound upon the way ChatGPT can help with choosing a career path. Will this AI format eliminate certain jobs as well? ChatGPT and AI is changing basically daily or hourly. There always is talk, or there has been talk. I've seen things that do say that certain jobs might be eliminated. I think that the way that ChatGPT can help with choosing a career path is you can ask questions like, tell me about a day in the life of an accountant. What are the top challenges that accountants face right now? What is the career outlook for accountants? You can be asking those questions just to get some additional information to help form your decision making process. I would not solely rely on ChatGPT to choose a new career path, but it is out there as a tool that can sort of help you in your job search. What are the top skills needed to be a project manager? How can I make a career transition from X to X? And you can see what sorts of information you can get by asking those questions. And what that should do is give you ideas for more opportunities for you to brainstorm and do your research and discovery to put a plan into place. Do you have any recommendations for people who have already held leadership positions in one field and are moving into an entry level position in a new field? How would you recommend talking about that in an interview? I think it's okay to say I'm really excited about the opportunity to move into a new career field. As a leader in my previous career, I was able to form relationships and really get a good understanding of the customer process or whatever the skill is. And now I'm really excited to dive in fully to that particular component of this role. And so, you're not it's obvious if you're in an interview at that time that you're going through a career change, and also the people who are interviewing you think you would be a good fit for the role. And so, really talk about what's driving you to make the change, what you're really excited about, and where your strengths are, so that they can understand how you can contribute or fill successfully the role that they're hiring for. Should you communicate your desire to switch careers on LinkedIn? I think essentially the answer to this question is yes. However, you are likely not going to say teacher wanting to move into project management. Instead, you want to position your LinkedIn profile, your headline, your about section, your skills section to the career or the job that you want in the future, not the job that you currently have. Now, there might be a time frame where your LinkedIn profile is sort of a blended approach. Some of the skills that you can have up to 50 on LinkedIn, might be in your current career. Some might be geared towards your next career, and some may be those transferable skills. And so that's what I think that you should do on your LinkedIn profile. You certainly can adjust your about section to highlight the skills that you have for the new career that you are looking for. You also can select in your headline section, in that where your name is, I believe you can select, I think it's an industry. So you could pick your new industry there. And so those are some things that you can do to start positioning yourself as somebody who's more of an expert in the area you're trying to get to. What if you could be perceived as overqualified, too much education, or already have leadership experience and you don't want to be in a leadership position any longer? Yes. So being overqualified is a thing. It does, there are many people that apply to jobs when they are overqualified. If you have advanced degrees that are not required for the role that you are applying to, you don't need to include those advanced degrees on your resume. Like if you have a master's degree or another postgraduate degree and it only requires a bachelor degree, there's no rule that says you have to put your your graduate degree on your resume. So take that off. Also, what I would do is, instead of focusing on your years and years of experience and your leadership experience, instead focus on the skills that are relevant to the role. Again, if we talk about this in terms of your cover letter, you want to sort of tie yourself to your interest in the organization, as well as honing in on specific parts of the role that you're applying to and your interest in those specific parts. You're not necessarily downplaying your leadership opportunity, but you're being more laser focused on the activities that you want to do in the job that you are applying for, and that is going to sort of help start to shape the thought process of the person reading your documents. So often I have to judge my own skill levels, but I really have no idea about many of my skills. How to obtain an objective outside evaluation of my skills? Well, a couple things that you can do. You can do different skills assessments. There are, I think it's not up to 90. I think there are close to 90 skills assessments on LinkedIn. FlexJobs also has over 170 skills assessments, both hard and soft skills. And so if there are specific skills, particularly I would say hard skills that you're looking to measure to know if you can include them on your resume, or if you have the understanding that you think it needs to be for the job that you are applying for, skills assessments are where you can start first. What percentage of remote work requires tech expertise? Well, you don't have to be a technology expert to be a successful remote worker. You have to have a good understanding of digital technology tools, because as a remote worker, you'll be using those. And so, in the job postings that you are looking at for the particular jobs you'd like to apply for, take note of the technology skills or programs that are mentioned and prioritize those that show up with the most frequency. The other thing that you can keep in mind is things like Google Workspace, Zoom, Skype to some degree, Slack are all very popular right now in terms of digital communication tools that employers use. So you could start there. Now, again, you don't have to be an expert, but you do have to know how to navigate certain technology programs to be able to communicate with your remote team. Are hybrid positions posted as well? Yes, you can find hybrid jobs and fully remote jobs on FlexJobs. There actually is a filter when you are in the job search to select your remote work level, and you can do that and find those jobs. We have seen when we compared 2022 to 2021, there was about a 53% increase in hybrid work opportunities. Now, when you select hybrid work opportunities, or anytime you are searching for a job on the FlexJob site, and anywhere when you are searching remotely, you want to include your location, because 95% of remote jobs actually do have a location requirement. Even though you as the employee could do that work from anywhere, companies do have that requirement for a number of different possible reasons. Oh, and that leads into my next question. Why do we need to put our location in a search for a remote job? Companies have to follow tax rules and regulations. And so, for example, if you are in the United States, you might pay state income tax if you live in a state that has a state income tax. I do not. There are different states that have, state income requirements and states that don't have that. And so companies have to abide by those rules and regulations for each state that they hire employees in. And not every company is set up to employ employees, a W 2 employee in every state or country or region. Other reasons that a company wants you to be in a specific location is if the job does require some travel. They may want you to be close to an airport, if they would like you to be in a certain time zone to be able to communicate with clients or customers. Those are some additional reasons that there might be a location requirement for a remote job. We are seeing, there are of course jobs that are available for work from anywhere. Truly, you can do the job from anywhere in the world. Those are just a lot smaller in number than the total number of remote and hybrid opportunities as a whole. All right, last question. If I have physical limitations that are a big part of wanting to switch to remote work, should I mention this? This is a personal decision, but if whatever your limitations are would be transparent to a remote work employee, and you don't need specific accommodations, like text to type or something along those lines. It is up to you if you want to tell the employer. They may not know that you can't lift heavy things, but if that's not something that is required for you to do for your remote job, then it's not necessarily something that you need to include or disclose to the employer during the interview process, because it's not going to affect your outcome or your production of the work that's going to be required of you for that particular job that you are applying to. Now, if there are accommodations that you need because you wouldn't be able to complete the duties of the role without them, then that is definitely something that you need to consider talking to the employer about, so they are fully aware of what they will need to provide you in order for you to be able to do the work.